Hey guys, this is Thea. Thank you so much for joining me here at Up Close and Painting with Thea. And today we're taking a little bit closer of a look at distressing. We've got our rustic glam look that we're going for. And part of that is distressing and removing some of the paint. Yes, that's what distress means. Distress means you're taking away the finish that is there. I say that because we can get confused between antiquing. There's a couple of different methods that I use, and I want to show you each one of them and why I use them, where I use them. I want to show you the tools that I use, and also go over like how do you choose where to distress and how to go about it. We can get caught up and kind of freeze and not do any, or sometimes we go overboard and then come out with something that we're just not happy with. So what I'm hoping is that I can show you how to approach it in a way that you can kind of understand and really get into and enjoy to make the process a little bit easier for you. So hold on one second. Let's see. Do I have? Yes. The first thing I want to show you is my sandpaper. And of course, I know guys, typically nobody like chimes in because, well, you're working or something, and this is a group. But if you do by chance hop in, let me know that you're there so I can answer your questions if you have them. Otherwise, if you're watching on replay, please drop your questions below and I will get to them as soon as I see them. If you have other questions about your projects that are not related to distressing, then go ahead and make a whole new post in the group and we'll be happy to help you out. So the first thing is my flexible sandpaper. This is made by 3M. I generally get it either from Amazon or they carry it at the home improvement stores. I've actually seen it at Walmart. Wherever you find sandpaper, usually you're able to find this. What's different about it is it's super soft, bendable, moldable, flexible. So a lot of times whenever we're sanding and we want just a nice fine sand, we can end up gouging the finish, or maybe the paper will just kind of gouge into an area that we weren't intending on sanding at all. And this prevents a lot of that. You're able to wrap it around your hand or a cloth. You can change it in different ways to suit whatever it is that you're actually trying to sand. So this is my go-to. Another thing is, for instance, this one is a 150 grit. You would probably compare this more to like a 220 or something for a rigid sandpaper. Because it is soft, it just feels different, and so it's gonna, the abrasive qualities are also gonna be different. So keep that in mind whenever you're choosing something. Usually I won't go any lower than maybe an 80 grit on this. So sorry. But that's just, you know, my personal preference. I don't need to go any lower. But even at 80, whereas if you got an 80 grit that was in the hard paper like sandpaper, it can tend to really dig in a little bit more than you might intend to sometimes. With this, you have far less of a problem with that. So I will usually get the 80, this is the 150, and then sometimes I'll go as high as 300. Really, 300 is the highest that I need for a super smooth finish. Like I said, this isn't as abrasive or harsh, so it's really easy to get a nice smooth finish with it. This is good for spindles, legs, anything round, because you can literally just go over it and then just begin working it that way. So yes, that's my buddy, my friend. It's great stuff. Another thing is the sanding block. That can make things easier. I feel like they lose their abilities kind of fast though. So what I'll tend to do is I'll take it and I will take my flexible sandpaper and just wrap around it. So that way I've got my semi-hard block that I can work with, but I've got my nice new sandpaper to go over it. Whatever grit that I want, I'm able to just go over it. I'm trying to think of when I would use this. This is going to be great for some of those hard edges, or when you're just really wanting to get a nice flat sand, say on the top surface of a piece where you just want it to be super smooth on the top. Sanding with our hands, there's variances in the amount of pressure that we're putting. So if we use an actual block, that's going to give us a much smoother, more consistent sand across it. So that's one time that I would use it. If I need to have more rigid of a surface, I've just got little blocks of wood, and I'll take the block of wood, and once again, I wrap my little piece of sandpaper around it. And this is great for those edges and getting a nice consistent distress along the hard edges of like a drawer or the outside of the top of the piece. And I'll show you all of this as we're going to give you a better understanding of what my words actually mean. But always having just like an extra little block. I love this for different things. One is sanding, another is, you can see where I use it sometimes to add and layer paint for different textures and dimension. I've got part of it sawn off to where there's an angle so I can get up into little nooks and crannies with it. So I use it for all kinds of different things. But one, yes, I use it for sanding. The other thing is just a rag. Now, a wet rag or baby wipes, I've seen that method before. I don't personally use it. I just use a wet rag. Those are going to be most effective if you are doing kind of like a wet sand where you have painted the piece and it's only been sitting for a few minutes to where it's rather dry and set up, but it's not hard. So you can easily kind of wipe away the paint with the rag or the baby wipe or whatever you want to use. Sometimes coming in after the fact, I can tend to use this. Maybe I'll spray down the surface a little bit or just let the rag sit there for a moment and, you know, kind of reconstitute those hardened or dried up pigments. But you can then lift them away with this. And a lot of times you'll get a lot more of a natural kind of distress. It's not going to look as harsh as sometimes we'll get with the sandpaper approach. So, on to distressing. I'm going to take a second. I want to bring you down here. I've got the piece down here. And I want to kind of show you a little bit of a closer look of the piece. The other day, I posted some pictures to show you, you know, when I stand back, what it looks like over film. If you get up close, what it looks like. I want you to really see this thing ain't all that pretty. Like in the one picture, it's beautiful. But the reason I show you this is because I don't want you comparing yourself to somebody else's highlight photos. A lot of times we can see them and think we're never going to get that perfect. But the thing is, you're not seeing the flaws. You're not seeing the dings or where they went outside of the lines. And this is a great case in point because in the photo, it looked beautiful, flawless, whatever. If you get up close, it's kind of a hot mess. And I knew that was going to happen. I wasn't concerned about it because I know that I'm going to come in with distressing to remove paint in different areas and also do the black wash. And I really didn't want it to look all that perfect, but I just want you to see the variation in what the picture shows. And it wasn't edited. I didn't edit the photo to take anything out. And then what real life is. So hold on one second. Let's see if I can do this eloquently. Once again, you might want to close your eyes for a second. Don't look at my paint cabinet. Okay. See right there, there's a good little place to see. You can see all kinds of places where I just kind of bloop bloop. You don't see you see like all of the lines and like where the gold came down. Some of that's going to go away. Some of it's going to be distressed away. Some of it's going to go away with the glaze. Or if I really want to clean it up, I can take that fine, the flexible sandpaper, curl it up a little bit and go in here and sand it away, and I could clean that up and you could just see the blue. You can see on the surface here where I've already gone across it with the block to get it nice and smooth. But here, again, can you see? I have to go back and look at my computer to see what you're seeing. But down here, that's horrible. Like, that's not consistent. But I knew that I didn't need it to be consistent, so I wasn't completely worried about that. All right, so I'm going to bring you guys back up. Are you dizzy? I'm sorry. But I really want to make that point because a lot of times we can get caught up in kind of comparing ourselves, and we shouldn't do that. Enjoy the process. Trust the process. Keep on going to the end and see what you have there. Take a step back and look at your work. Now, let's get to distressing. I'm going to bring you down to the floor level so that I can work on the top, and you can see what I'm doing. And then I'll bring it up to the table so that you can see it from the front as I'm working on it. Let's see. Okay. I'm going to bring it paint over here. It's so funny because the camera shows everything exactly backwards from the way it is. So I'm constantly having to figure out which way I really do need to turn things. This needs to go this way. Nope. See? Just like that. Okay. So here we go. I have a super smooth surface. I've already gone over it with the flat sandpaper. And yeah, just kind of made it, it was great before. There were no brush marks, but now it's just like powdery and fine and feels great. So how do I figure out where to sand? One of my starting points is simply taking a look at it and deciding if this was painted 50 years ago and it had sat in a home with kids and people going in and out and bumping into it and opening it up and closing it again, where would be the places that it gets worn? It could be some of the places where we pick it up and move it. We hit it with the side of our leg, so we're trying to go around it. Those high points, chances are this is going to get hit and the paint is going to be removed far earlier than in this little curve. So think about those things whenever you're trying to decide where you want to distress. Another thing is generally there's not going to be a bunch of distress on the surface. I don't know about you, but I mean, I don't rub against the tops of my pieces very much. So I wouldn't concentrate too much on that. And another thing is we tend to go across things. I will not typically find myself rubbing against a piece of furniture in a downward motion. So unless it's like a high point like this that goes up and down, I'm not going to distress in a downward motion. It's all going to be pretty much across, or it might be an area that I kind of remove paint because that's where I pull on the piece of hardware or I push it closed, something like that. So keep those things in mind as you go. First thing is I'm going to attempt to remove some of that gold. I don't know how well you can actually see that. Yeah, okay, I guess you can see it some. Let's see how this works. I've just got my little flexible piece of sandpaper. I've bent it over and it's just in a nice little curve. And I'm going to lay it in there. I'll just gently begin sanding and see if I can move it. And yep, sure did. It's all gone. Just that easy and that fast. I'm going to come over here where the blue is meeting the gold, and I see that the gold came up over the blue. Same thing. There. Now I have a nice crisp line. So it's great for cleaning up the work that you've done. It's also great for starting to sand back and reveal some of the layers of paint, the colors that you've used. Because remember, we started off with the deep turquoise as the base coat. So as we sand, we can expect that the deep turquoise is going to come up through it. All right. So now, where do we actually want to distress? I'm going to start with this point over here. And I'm just going to take my sandpaper, lay it over the edge, and begin pulling it from side to side. And I will show you in a second exactly how that turned out, but that was it. I'm already done. I just barely removed some of the darker blue. You can see a little bit of the turquoise, and then some of the wood tone. I don't want much, just a little bit, just enough. We'll go over here and do the same thing. And this is just going to be where over time people ran into it, tried to fight against it, you know, the things that happen in day-to-day life. It's nice and smooth. I'm going to bring my sandpaper around just to kind of smooth everything out a little bit more. And then sometimes what will happen is that deep turquoise will continue to come through where I'm pulling the sandpaper. And sometimes this will give me a good starting point. Say, for instance, there's a little piece of raised wood that peeks up whenever I pull the sandpaper across. I'll go back and I'll sand that a little bit more because it would have naturally done that. Here, I've got a piece that was actually broken off initially, before I started painting, and I knew that I was going to want to make this like a little rustic area. So I'm going to pull it across. And make that a little bit of a focal point. Once again, let's bend it, kind of press it in here, and get some of these places where I overlapped with that gold. And now specifically with the Rustic Glam look, we don't want to just see these really kind of apparent brown spots coming through. So that's why we're choosing to do this now rather than after doing the wash. We're going to do the antiquing wash with the black paint. You can choose to use glaze if you're more comfortable with that. I understand. I'm not a glaze person. I like to use color washes with paint for various reasons, and I'll talk about that whenever we go to do it. But with the distress showing, we're going to see some of those really warm wood tones come through, which is great. But then putting the wash over it just makes it look like the whole piece has aged over time. So I choose to do that after I've done the gold, after I've done the distress. Then I come back and I will do the antique wash. Over here, here's one spot. See? I was a mess, y'all. But it's something that we can't work with and fix and make a little bit better if we want to. If we want to. It's not meant to be perfect. That's what I love about the artistic finishes. Okay, so I'm also going to take like this little area right here. If I have like books that I had on here that I was always sliding off, this top area, this little lip, would be one of those places where we would start to see some wear. So I'm going to start removing paint right there. And now I want to make sure that my hand is not going inside this crease to remove the gold. So what I'm actually going to do is go ahead and take that block. We'll wrap it up in there. There we go. If you can't see it, I'm going to go ahead and wet my rag so you can see a little bit better what it looks like. Bring the camera down. Okay, zoom in a little bit. You can see we've got the warm wood tone right here, the gold, and then the blue. It's not much. It's not much at all. Just enough to kind of give that just a little bit of a rustic, non-perfect look, which then makes this whole finish that much more forgiving. I'm going to come over here and do the same thing. And over here, any of the places where it's curving out will be a natural place to do it. Right here, not so much. Here, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes. You get the picture. And you can take that as far or as minimal as you want to. You can do just a tiny bit. You can do none at all. For the actual rustic glam look, you're going to want to do something. So pick your battles. Don't get too nervous as you're seeing all of these little streaks and stuff. A lot of that you'll see is going to fade back once we begin varnishing or waxing, whatever your choice is. We'll go over all of that whenever we get to that stage. All right, so I'm going to bring this guy to the top. Liz, if you're watching, I've missed you. You were the one person that actually ended up getting to watch during the day. All right. Let's see if I can't. Now, I would like to be able to see a little bit more, so I'm actually going to bring the table forward, if I can, without bringing the house down. Okay. There we go. And now, once again, see, we've got these little tiny areas that are raised. That's probably going to be a place that I focus on. The edges of the doors, where those little recesses go in, you've got the part that just kind of sticks out a little bit. The legs, this is a beautiful area to work with because it just makes sense. Our legs are going to hit that. Our foot is going to stump it. You know, it just makes sense. So, again, I've got my block because I don't want to push into this area. I just want to hit that super high point. So I've got my, let me go with the soft block this time. If I can get it wrapped up. I've just got a little tear in there, so I'm trying to avoid that. And there you go. And so you have to be careful not to do that. It's not going to cause me problems right now, but if I were to do it too much, then yeah, might drive myself a little bit crazy. Down here, I'm going a little bit harder than up there. Chances are, naturally, over time, this would get bumped more than this top part up here. And what's nice about this, too, going with the rustic look on this glam piece, over time, whenever the family or whoever nicks it, bumps it, whoever adopts this beautiful piece, they may not worry about dinging it or if a kid mars it or something like that. Because it's already got its own sense of distress on it. I'm going to go across here, not necessarily for distress, but to kind of bring these colors together a little bit more. So I've got lots of layering action happening right there. I want to add to that. I'm going to go ahead and go over it. I can also take the paper and just, and yes, in all honesty, I should be wearing a respirator. I apologize. Okay, I'm going to wet this so that I can see what I'm working with. Yeah, okay, I'm good. I'll just leave right there. I just didn't want to see the paint marks, the actual brush, where you can see the one paint going over the other. So, all right. Same thing down here. Now down here, I do want to kind of, there we go, already. Break it down to the wood a little bit. And again, I'm going to wipe it with my dampened rag, just so that I can see exactly what's happening. And see, I love the wood. It's a little bit harsh. It's a very orange tone. But again, we're going to be going over that with the antiquing. So it's going to bring it back a couple of notches. So don't stress if you're like, oh, that looks a little bit crazy. A, we can add paint later. B, we're going to do the antiquing wash. It's going to be much more subdued and fade back a little bit. I'm going a little more of a circular motion, so it's not too striated. And again, because I'm using the flexible sandpaper, it kind of allows me to do that. It's not super jagged. I'm going to grab my soft sanding block. Again, again, hitting these high points, letting the block hit where it may, so that it's rather natural in where it's taking off the paint. Okay. Go ahead and hit down here. What'll be nice is as I break through that liquid leaf, it's going to bring back through some of the blue tones. And I may even go across this a little bit. Just have a little bit of fun. Because see, worst case scenario, I pull away too much, and I go back and I paint it back in again. It's not that big a deal. You see, I prefer the slight variation, so it's not quite so gold. Personal preference. Go here, a little bit on the door. Typically, I'll keep it rather symmetrical. I don't want to be too literal, but at the same time, like I just want it to make sense. And go right here at the door at this edge, because that's where people would grab it. Again, using the standing block to kind of get in there. There we go. And see, I talked earlier about up and down, left and right. While the actual distress is showing up and down, move in whatever way you need to get the distress to show up. And again, typically we're going to want the distress to go horizontally, but the actual raised edges, if they are going up and down, then of course the distress is going to present as being up and down. So don't stress about that. Don't stress about the distress. I'm going to go with this. Just smooth that out a little bit. Down here, I feel like people would have gone in there and grabbed something and it would have drug in this area. So I'm going to open the doors a little bit. Maybe right here. And also, this might be a good opportunity too to go across the doors. I do paint the edges, but I don't want them to look like they're supposed to be perfect. Over the time, they're not gonna be perfect. So I'll go ahead and take my flat sanding block to go over it and kind of start to wear away some of that natural paint that would have come away anyway. Make it nice and smooth. You never want it to be in the way of the function of the door or the drawer for that matter. So it just helps. This little area, make sure there's no places that the paint began to accumulate. Make sure it's just nice and dry. You can even come right here in the middle maybe and add a little bit more distress. Remove a little bit more paint. Just make it look a bit more intentional. There we go. Bring it over so you can see that. I'm losing a leg. You see? Go over here and do the same thing. Make it nice and smooth. I have not decided, if anything, that I'm going to do the inside. Maybe just do the lemon salve. Reason being is I can make it really pretty, but I kind of want the gold that's on the wire of the doors to pop. So having that darkness behind it kind of allows that to happen. So I may just leave it. And that's okay. It's totally okay. If you don't want to do decoupage or whatever else on the inside, that's fine. Don't feel like you have to. I gotta figure out what's going on with that door. I don't want to close all the way. But there you have it. Of course, I'm going to go on the other side and finish that side. But I don't need to take you long for that. You can see, I'm going to bring it over here so you can see this leg. And I will try to take pictures of it so you can see it before and after the wash and how it ends up presenting itself. And who knows, maybe we'll repaint it. I don't know. We'll see. It's all changeable and fixable. It's just paint. But I think that's it. Same thing that I did over here, I'm going to do over there to that side. And I'll come back in a few minutes and we will do the color wash. So again, we've got our soft sanding block, a flexible sandpaper, a piece of wood that I turned into a sanding block, rag. I didn't need to do any sort of wet distress on this. And maybe one day later on in a different project, that'll be more of a focus. On here, we just don't have to. And that's it, guys. So, bring it up here so I can formally tell you all goodbye. Up next, we'll be doing the black antiquing color wash, showing you how we kind of bring all of this together, make it all make sense. And we're just about ready to wrap this piece up. So I'll talk to y'all later.